The ash-laden breeze blew slowly over the floating cities of Nyxara, tinting the sky with pale and heavy hues. Silence hung between the rusted structures, as if even time itself was tired of this broken world. Yara Solis walked through the narrow alleys, her worn boots sinking into the soot that covered every surface. Her eyes scanned the horizon, always alert, always suspicious. Life in the skies was a cruel game, where every day could be your last. The memories of her younger sister still haunted her nights, whispering broken promises between fragmented dreams. The enigmatic map lay folded in her pocket, marked with ancient symbols that no one dared to decipher. The paper seemed to pulse against her skin, as if holding a secret that should never be uncovered. The Shadow Enclave controlled everything with an iron fist, their patrols sweeping through every street, every shelter, searching for any spark of hope that might still be left. Yara knew that this map was more than just a relic. It was an invitation to something bigger, something that could change Nyxara's fate forever. Dren Halo's hoarse voice echoed in her mind, reminding her of the rumors about the astral fragments. Relics said to carry the power to either rebuild or destroy all that remained. Yara had no choice. Surviving was a matter of sacrifice, and she had learned early that nothing came without a price. The nights were too long to run from the shadows of the past, and every dawn brought the same question: how far would she go to find her sister? The scars on her arm burned whenever she got close to the ancient ruins, as if the very planet itself was trying to awaken something buried deep within her blood. Yara ignored the pain, shoving her feelings deep down in her chest. She didn't believe in lost bloodlines or tales of the firstborns. All that mattered was surviving one more day, until that map appeared and turned her world upside down. Dren was waiting for her at the old abandoned market, his face hidden under a ragged hood. His sharp eyes gleamed with a curiosity that Yara could never quite decipher. Beside him, Vea Kales was disassembling an energy rifle, her nimble fingers sliding over the parts as if they were an extension of her own body. The group was an unlikely mix, a hunter marked by the past, a mercenary without a homeland, and a thief trying to forget the mistakes she'd made. But in this forgotten city, broken alliances were worth more than empty promises. The marks on the map pointed to forgotten lands beyond the ash deserts, where the ruins hid secrets older than time itself. Yara felt her heart race as she imagined what she might find, or awaken. The legend of the firstborns whispered about a sealed power, an eternal fire that was just waiting for the right person to rise again. But too much power always came with ruin. The distant hum of the Enclave's drones echoed between the crumbling towers, forcing the group to move through the shadows. Every step was calculated, every breath muffled. Fear intertwined with adrenaline, making the air almost impossible to breathe. Yara gripped the hilt of the dagger at her waist, her eyes locked on the horizon, shrouded in ash storms. The map burned in her pocket, as if whispering secrets that no one was meant to hear. The first stop was the Caldrus Desert, a dead land where time had stopped. They said the souls of the ancient firstborns still roamed there, guarding fragments of lost power. Yara didn't believe in ghosts, but she had learned to respect the whispers that came from the ruins. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in crimson tones, she felt something stir inside her, a dormant presence that was starting to awaken. Dren led the way, his hands always near his holster. Vea walked beside Yara, her eyes sharper than any thief who claimed to care for nothing. The group moved through the ruins, the ashes swirling around them like faceless specters. The map pointed to a place beyond the desert, but the path would be marked by sacrifice. Every step echoed with the weight of a destiny no one dared name. As night fell over Nyxara, the sky lit up with the distant glow of an eclipsed moon. Yara wasn't sure if it was an omen or just another illusion in a dying world. All that was left was to keep moving forward, even if the path led her to something much darker than she could imagine. The Shadow Enclave wasn't just a place. It was a symbol of relentless power, a fortress that hovered over the city like an invisible shadow, controlling every movement, every breath. Yara knew she was getting too close, but the desire to find her sister spoke louder. The structure was a labyrinth of rusted metal and walls that breathed the past of a lost era. The doors, imposing and dark, opened only for those who had already surrendered to something much bigger than mere survival. The sound of patrols echoed through every corridor, their armor gleaming in the broken light of shattered lamps, reflecting the empty faces of soldiers who no longer remembered what it was to be human. Dren had explained that the Enclave not only controlled the city with brute force, but also maintained an army of specters, beings made of pure hatred and shadow. They were like fragments of lost souls with no will of their own, but with one single goal: hunt anyone who dared question the established order. Yara didn't care about what they were or the cruelty of their missions. What mattered was what the Enclave knew, what they could be hiding. And the map she carried seemed to point straight to the heart of that fortress, to a secret so old that even the Enclave feared it. Something tied to the lineage of the Firstborn, something that could either restore balance, or destroy it completely. Vea was the first to notice the movement. The thief, with her sharp senses, picked up the distant sound of heavy footsteps, like something was coming their way. Dren immediately stepped forward, his eyes quick, assessing the situation. They didn't have much time. The Enclave was on high alert, and any mistake could be fatal. Getting inside the Enclave was looking harder by the second. But for Yara, the impossible was always just a matter of choice, and she wasn't about to back down. The entrance was heavily guarded, like they'd been expecting someone like her. Yara didn't believe in coincidences, and her gut told her they had been expected. There was a reason the Enclave hadn't tried to kill all the rebels, a reason she was being led to this moment. The map burned in her pocket, like it was alive, pulsing with a power that seemed to sync with her own heartbeat. When they finally reached the gate, Yara glanced at Dren and Vea, a subtle nod of understanding passing between them. It was time. The group moved toward the stairs that led to the Enclave's underground entrance. The air felt thick with the sense that something was about to go down. The ground itself seemed to rumble in anticipation, like the place had a life of its own. "Stay sharp," Dren whispered, his voice low like distant thunder. He knew what they were about to face, and he wasn't too comfortable with the idea of facing it alone. Yara checked the map one last time. The words didn't make sense, but the symbols glowed as if they had come to life, guiding their steps. She felt they were closing in on something massive, something that would change everything. As they moved forward, a growing pressure filled the air. It was like the very atmosphere was soaked in secrets, and each breath echoed through the entire Enclave. The calm before the storm, as they say. Yara could have sworn something was watching them. But there was no time for fear. Whatever was lurking, she would face it like she always had. Suddenly, a bright light flashed at the end of the corridor, and before they could react, a figure appeared. It was a soldier, but not just any soldier. His face was covered by a mask, and his eyes seemed to shine with an intensity that froze the blood in their veins. He didn't speak, but his presence radiated authority. Like he was a sentinel, guarding something no one was ever meant to see. "You shouldn't be here." His voice was cold, emotionless, but full of absolute certainty. The figure didn't seem like he belonged to this world. Yara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation. This wasn't going to be an easy fight, but there was no turning back now. The path was right in front of her, and all she wanted was to find the secret the Enclave was desperately trying to hide. But what was waiting for them at the end of that corridor? What did the Enclave want so badly to protect? The answers were closer than ever, but at the same time, they seemed further away. The tension was palpable. The air was heavy, the feeling that something huge was about to happen undeniable. The Dark Enclave had its secrets, and Yara was about to uncover the most dangerous one of all. The pressure in the air kept building with every step Yara took toward the heart of the Enclave. The masked figure remained still, his intense gaze fixed on her, like he could see beyond the layers of reality. Yara knew he wasn't just any soldier. Something about him was different, like he carried a part of the Enclave itself, an extension of its power, its secrets. But she didn't have time to hesitate. The mission was clear, and she knew there was no turning back. "Were you?" Yara asked, trying to keep her voice steady, even though she could feel the weight of the unknown around her. Dren, standing beside her, also watched the soldier warily. His stance wasn't just defensive, it was the posture of a man who'd seen the worst of battle. Vea, as always, was ready to spring into action, her hand on the hilt of her blade. The silence that followed seemed to stretch time itself. The masked figure took a step forward, and it was as if the earth itself moved. His movements were quick and effortless, like he was dancing between shadows. He leaned in slightly, and when he spoke, his voice was like a whisper that spread through the air, carrying a sense of inevitability. "I am the Sentinel of the Veil," he said, and his words resonated with a deep truth. "You shouldn't be here, don't welcome it, but because the veil you want to tear down, Yara, can't be lifted without consequences." The mention of the veil made Yara's heart race. She knew she was facing something way bigger than she thought. It wasn't just her sister's fate at stake. The Dark Enclave was hiding something else, something that could change the course of history. The veil, as the Sentinel called it, seemed like the link between the forces that ruled this world and what was still untouchable. Yara felt a shiver run down her spine. The truth was right in front of her, but she wasn't ready to face it. "What are the consequences?" she asked, her voice quieter but determined. She wouldn't let herself give in to fear. Not now. The masked figure raised a hand, like the answer couldn't be explained with words. "The veil keeps the balance between worlds. It's the barrier between what was, what is, and what will be. Lifting it might bring answers, but it could also wake up forces that can't be controlled." The answer left her silent. What was the Enclave trying to protect if the veil was really at the center of it all? The words echoed in Yara's mind as she processed the magnitude of what she was about to face. The forces hidden here in the heart of the Enclave were no joke. It was like they were guarding a portal to something that could either destroy or save the world. "Are you ready to face what's coming next?" the Sentinel asked, the question sounding more like a challenge than a doubt. Yara looked at Dren and Vea. They weren't just allies. They were the only ones who could help face what was ahead. The decision was made. The veil had to be torn down no matter the cost. "Yeah," Yara replied, the word coming out more confidently than she felt inside. There was no room for indecision anymore. She knew that this moment was going to change everything. The Enclave wasn't just a place of oppression. It was a prison, and the key to unlocking it was right in front of them. But what else would they have to face by tearing down the veil? What ancient secrets would be revealed, and how would that change everything they thought they knew about the world? The Sentinel took a step back and, without saying another word, pointed to the massive door to his right. It was covered in runes and symbols that seemed to pulse with their own energy. The light from inside the room flickered like it was alive, reacting to their presence. "Go ahead," he said. "But remember, the veil isn't just a guardian. It's also a prisoner. And by touching it, you might release something that can't be controlled anymore." Yara exchanged a look with her allies. They were ready for whatever it took, but they had no idea they were about to unleash something beyond their worst imaginations. They started this journey with one simple mission: save Yara's sister. But now they were getting closer to something much bigger. Something that could change reality as they knew it. When the door opened, the air seemed to stir, like something was moving, hidden in the darkness beyond it. What would be waiting for them inside? And how would this affect their mission? There was no turning back now. The veil was about to be ripped open, and what they'd discover on the other side would define not just Yara's future, but everyone who dared to challenge the Dark Enclave. The sound of the runes began to reverberate off the walls, like the veil itself was reacting to Yara and her allies' presence. The air was thick, heavy, and the heat of the magical energy was felt with every breath. Yara felt a chill run down her spine. It was like she was about to wake up something very old and very dangerous. But for a moment, nothing happened. Silence filled the room, and she looked around, trying to understand what was about to be revealed. Dren, ever alert, placed a hand on his sword, and Vea, standing beside him, looked like she was on high alert. The Sentinel didn't move, but his presence was still there, watching them. Yara stepped forward, almost instinctively, her hand touching the pulsing runes on the door. The sensation was instant. Like something inside her had been lit up. The door slowly creaked open, and the darkness beyond seemed to swallow the light. "Get ready," Yara said, her voice low but firm. "The veil is about to be torn." With a collective sigh, the three of them stepped into the room. The air was thick, drenched in a heavy shadow that seemed to move with a life of its own. They moved cautiously, their eyes adjusting to the darkness. With every step, Yara felt the pressure mounting. The place was charged with magic, but not just any magic. It was old, dark, and above all, insidious. In the back of the room, an altar stood, covered in symbols Yara couldn't fully understand. At the center, a large, polished black crystal emitted a faint light that seemed to pull everyone's attention. She knew that crystal was the key, the source of the veil. But what did it hold? What did it really mean? Before she could get any closer, a presence made itself known. Something dark and cold. The air got heavier and the shadows around them started shifting like they were taking shape. Vea took a step forward, raising her blade firmly. "We're ready to face it," she said, her voice low but full of determination. The shadows began to condense, forming distinct shapes. A figure emerged, tall and cloaked in black, its eyes glowing with a deep red light. Yara could feel the power of that presence, something so pure in its evil that it seemed to be corrupting the very reality around them. She knew instantly that this wasn't just some random enemy. It was something way bigger, something tied to the veil itself. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure said, its voice soft but carrying power. "You have no idea what you're about to unleash. The veil isn't just a barrier. It's the last line of defense against the forgotten." The word forgotten echoed in the air, and a wave of dread spread through the group. Dren gripped the hilt of his sword, his eyes fixed on the figure. "Who are the forgotten?" he asked, his voice deep and alert. The figure smiled, but it wasn't a smile that made you feel safe. "They're what's left of what was wiped out. Spirits that were trapped beyond the veil. Now they're waking up and everything you know is about to fall apart." Shock ran through Yara and her allies. The veil, the very thing they thought would help them complete their mission, was actually the last barrier separating the world of the living from the horrors on the other side. And now, by breaking it, they had just opened the door to something way worse. "You've unleashed something that can't be controlled," the figure went on, its presence growing stronger, filling the space. "Now all of you will pay the price." The shadows around them grew thicker, like they were merging to form a storm. Yara felt the weight of the truth sinking into her chest. They had made their choice. The veil was shattered, but the consequences were still unknown. "We have to destroy the crystal," Yara shouted, adrenaline flooding her movements. The dark presence was becoming overwhelming, and she knew that if they didn't act, they'd be consumed. But the sentinel, who had stayed silent until now, stepped forward, blocking the way to the crystal. "Don't touch the crystal," he ordered, his voice urgent. "It's the last defense. It keeps the forgotten locked away. So what do we do now?" Dren asked, eyes locked on the crystal, sword in hand, ready to face any threat that came their way. The sentinel looked at Yara and her allies, his eyes heavy with the weight of centuries of secrets. "The only way to stop the full awakening of the forgotten is sacrifice. The veil can be restored, but not without a cost. Someone will have to take the place of the barrier." Yara looked at her friends. There was no time for hesitation. The veil was broken, and now the world was at the mercy of what they had just unleashed. Sacrifice was inevitable, but who would make it? And what would happen to whoever took that path? The air was thick with tension. The shadows around them seemed to breathe, moving in a grotesque way, almost like they were waiting for a command. Yara looked at the black crystal, now glowing with an intensity that seemed to tear reality around them. The sentinel stood still, his figure shrouded in mystery, eyes dark as if holding 1,000 secrets that would never be revealed. The truth he shared made them question everything they had believed up until that point. "The veil isn't just a barrier between worlds," the figure continued, its voice now darker, more distant. "It's the last line of defense, and whoever destroys it loses their own soul." The three companions stood there, silent, processing the gravity of the words. They had come to this place hoping to free the world from a cycle of pain and suffering, but the price seemed way higher than they ever imagined. "So what do we do now?" Vea asked, her voice tense but firm. She knew there was no more time for doubt. The threat was closing in, and if they didn't act now, everything would be lost. The sentinel took a deep breath, like the weight of his mission had finally settled on his shoulders. He looked at Yara, his eyes burning with an intensity she couldn't ignore. "The only way to restore the veil is with a sacrifice. The crystal keeps the shadows trapped, but it also keeps the life of whoever destroys it. Someone's got to take their place." The silence was deep. Yara felt the weight of the decision. She knew what this meant. To save the world, someone had to sacrifice themselves. Someone had to become the new anchor between the two worlds. Dren stepped forward, his eyes full of determination. "I'll do it. I can't let this end, you guys. I know what it means. Someone has to do this, and it's me." "No," Yara shouted, rushing toward him. "No, Dren. We can't lose you now. You're our strength. Without you, we have nothing." But Dren didn't listen. He was already walking towards the altar, the sword firmly gripped in his hands. "You guys are worth so much more than any sacrifice. The veil needs someone strong, someone with courage. I'm that someone. and I'm choosing this. I won't let the world fall into darkness." Yara tried to stop him, but the sentinel, with a look that seemed to carry 1,000 centuries, held her back. "Let him do what he has to do. There's no time left." Dren looked at his friends one last time, then, with quiet strength, knelt before the crystal. He raised the sword above his head, the blade shining with a bright light, reflecting the darkness surrounding the place. He knew that by doing this, everything he knew, everything they fought for, would change forever. But deep down he knew his choice was the right one. With a cry of determination, Dren drove the blade into the center of the crystal. The reaction was instant. The ground shook, and a wave of magical energy spread through the room, lighting everything around them with a light so bright it blinded them for a moment. The shadows began to stir, but not like before. They were being contained, suppressed. The veil was being restored. And with it, the darkness was once again imprisoned. But Dren didn't rise. His life had been drained by the power of the sacrifice, and his body fell onto the altar, lifeless, but with a peaceful smile. He had done what needed to be done. Yara and Vea slowly approached, their eyes full of pain and sorrow, but also a silent gratitude. Dren had given his life to save them all. He had fulfilled his mission, his promise. The sentinel looked at the crystal, now still, its shadows locked away again, but his mission wasn't over. The veil was complete, but now they needed to return. The war against the forces of shadows was far from over, and the truth about the forgotten still hadn't been fully revealed. Dren made the sacrifice. The veil is restored, but the path isn't over. What's left now is the fight against the shadows that are still among us. Yara felt a sense of hope, but also fear. They had done what needed to be done, but the world was still at risk. The final battle was far from finished. She looked at her friends, at Vea, who was holding her hand tightly, and at the sentinel, who was watching her with a look of respect. The veil had been restored, but the real sacrifice wasn't in just one person. The real sacrifice would be the constant fight for survival, the fight against the unknown, against what remained in the shadows. They had restored the veil. But the real war was just beginning. As the last of the shadows dissipated, Yara, Vea, and the sentinel stood in silence, staring at the altar where Dren had given his life. The darkness had been pushed back, but the feeling of loss was heavy in the air. They knew his sacrifice had been necessary, but there was no joy in watching a friend leave this way. They had completed their mission, but the cost had been high, maybe higher than they could understand. The sky was clearer now, the veil restored, but they knew there was still a long road ahead. The sentinel looked at Yara with a look that conveyed silent understanding. He knew the battle against the forces of darkness wasn't over. The veil had been restored, but the shadows would keep trying to break through. "This isn't the end," he said, his voice steady. "The veil is saved, but the world is still at risk. They won't give up that easily." Yara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her loss, but also the fire of determination burning in her chest. She looked at Vea, and the two of them, in a silent gesture, understood that their fight was far from over. Dren had made the sacrifice, but now it was their turn, and everyone still fighting to carry on the resistance. "What happened here? It won't be in vain," Yara said firmly, the sorrow replaced by courage. "We'll fight. We'll honor his sacrifice, and we'll face whatever comes next. Together." The sentinels nodded, knowing that now they were the last bastions against the darkness. They had restored the veil, but the world's secrets were still waiting to be uncovered. What was left now was an endless journey, a constant battle, but also a promise that hope would never fade. They walked towards the horizon, ready to face the forces of darkness, with Dren's sacrifice in their hearts. The veil had been restored, but the real fight wasn't against monsters or shadows. The real fight was against fear, doubt, and uncertainty. It was the fight for hope, for the light that still existed. And as they walked, they knew that even though the war had no end, the truth that Dren's legacy would live on forever in their hearts would guide them until the last day. The war against the darkness was far from over. But the veil had been restored, and that was what kept them alive. What kept them fighting. If you liked this story, don't forget to drop a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more stories like this. I'll see you in the next video.